Good morning. Today we are correcting our CO1 homework. So as you're going through the homework, make sure you're making any corrections that need to be made. So when you come back to study it, you're studying the correct answers. So I just went through this with the class. If you are at home, you can pause it and look at what the answers are, making sure you put the correct, if it's an integer or not, opposite, and absolute value. So let's look at our second page. Our second page at the top, I had told us that we needed to do the number line. You don't have to do a big number line every time, but you could go from the two numbers. So, and then you can always look at which one is greater, which one is the farther to the right, thinking about that thermometer, which one's getting hotter. As the temperature goes up, the number gets greater, the bigger number. As the temperature gets colder, it's going to be a smaller number. So we have 10 is the greater number, 6 is the greater number, -9 is greater than -11, even though it seems like 11 would be bigger than 9, but when they're negatives going down the thermometer, it's colder. -11 is colder than -9, so it's going to be a smaller number. -9 is actually greater. We have 3, 2, -16, 21, 0, -35, -112, -5, and 2. Are there any on here that I don't understand why that number is greater? Madison.
I just have a question. It's not that I got them right, but
Okay.
Do you want us to leave it plain if we got it right, or do you want us to write a star or something?
That it's you're correcting for yourself.
Oh. Okay.
So whatever works for you. So when you come back to review it for the test, if it makes sense to you, if you give yourself a little star each time, you can do that. If you just want to make the correction with your red pen, whatever works for you, okay? Because it's for your learning, your benefit. I'm not going to come around and check it. Any questions on these ones? All right. So then we have the bottom of our page. Which is greater, 15 or the opposite of -17? Well, the opposite of -17 is I don't know why it's not writing. The opposite of -17 is a 17. So 17 is greater. Which is greater, 20 or the absolute value of 19? The absolute value of 19 is 19. 20 is greater than 19. Which is greater, the opposite of 8, which is -8, or the absolute value of -10? Absolute values, it's 10 hops away from 0. So that absolute value of -10 is 10. So 10 is bigger than -8, so it's the absolute value of -10. Notice how I actually went through and I wrote what that answer was over each one, so I knew which numbers to compare. You can write on these papers, you can give yourself little notes and little tips to help you out like that. Which is greater, the absolute value of -7, absolute value is going to be positive, or the opposite of -12. The opposite of -12 is 12. 12 is bigger than 7, so the opposite of -12 is greater. Then I'm thinking of a negative integer that is the distance of 16 away from its opposite. So if it's away from its opposite, we know it's going to be the same number, one side's positive, one side's negative. And if it's 16 in between, I have to look at half of it is going to the right on the positive side, half of it is going to the left on the negative side. So half of 16 is 8. So I know from positive 8 to a negative 8, it's going to be 16 hops between them. So that's how I figured it out. I knew the absolute value was 16. Not absolute value, sorry. I knew it was a distance of 16 between both opposites. So whenever you're dealing with opposites, it's always half is on one side, half is on the other, right? It's the same distance away from 0. Any questions on any of these ones? Do we understand the answers, how we got the answers? So Cameron, I know you were following along with that. Is it making sense?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. All right. So with that, we are going to stop our video and I'm going to start a new one for today's lesson.